Foster's home for imaginary friends had an entire fleet of creative imaginary friends for anyone to enjoy, but one that stood out above all the rest had to be Wilt. And that's not just because my man was tall either. Wilt was a gentle giant that left a clear impression on anyone who watched the show growing up. He was all about being kind to others and doing the right thing, but for the longest time, nobody really knew where he came from or learned those ideals. And that was probably for the better, because Wilt's backstory turned out to be truly heartbreaking. Now, Wilt had been a main character of the Foster's Home series since the very first episode, and right away he solidified himself as a fan favorite. He was not only the tallest member of the core group of imaginary friends, but he also had the biggest heart. He was the first character to say please and thank you, and the word sorry sort of became his catchphrase because he was so concerned about doing anything that would upset anyone. I know, the bar is pretty low, but don't let that take away from the point that he's pretty nice. Wilt had one of the most recognizable voices in the house to fans, as he was brought to life by the veteran voice actor Phil Lamar, who is just as kind to fans as the character would be. Wilt's personality and appearance separated him from most of the friends in the house, as he was always shown to be laid back, cool, and collected, while also being very helpful, honest, and above all, nice. Seriously, like, it might sound like I'm a broken record, which isn't far from the truth, but much like Eduardo was known for being a scaredy cat, Wilt was known for being the super nice guy. Like, even Canadians would be like, okay, you're a little too nice. Now, as for his physical appearance, Wilt was clearly designed to play the sport that he was shown to favor, basketball, since his creator made him extremely tall. However, that didn't explain all the strange quirks that his character design had, such as all the stitches that could be seen on his left arm, as well as the side of his face. On top of that as well, he also had one crooked eye stalk on the left side of his head, while the right one was perfectly straight. But beyond what was visible on the surface and what you could tell from his personality, there wasn't much else to go on though when wondering where Wilt came from. For the longest time, fans of the show were forced to wonder why Wilt looked the way he did and where he came from in the first place, and it kinda seemed like the show wasn't ever going to answer these questions. However, that all changed in Season 4. And thankfully, all of the questions surrounding Wilt's backstory were finally answered in the two-part episode Good Wilt Hunting. The episode finally revealed what happened to him when he was first created and why he was separated from the child that made him in the first place. Good Wilt Hunting opened up with the imaginary friends at Foster's all enjoying a 5-year reunion. However, Mac and Blue quickly realized that Wilt was the only member of the core group of friends that wasn't spending time with his creator. And as you'd know from watching the show, Blue was never the one to consider personal space or a person's privacy, and just as you'd expect, he began to bug Wilt by asking him questions about why his creator wasn't there. In fact, they pestered Wilt so much that not only did he try to run away from them, but he ultimately decided to run away from Foster's home for imaginary friends. That being said though, he did have another goal in mind other than simply getting away from Blue and Mac. He also wanted to finally set things right with his arch rival, whom he hadn't mentioned up until that point. After Wilt ran away, Blue and Mac decided to gather up a search party to look for Wilt, which consisted of themselves as well as Frankie, Eduardo, and his creator, Officer Nina Valerosa, as well as Coco and her two co-creators, Douglas and Adam. And it's through their journey to find Wilt that fans were finally shown what actually happened to him as a young imaginary friend and why he separated himself from the kid who made him. Not only did Blue and the gang learn that Wilt's creator was none other than the professional basketball player Jordan Michaels, but it was also on that journey that Frankie expressed just how secretive Wilt was. According to her, through all of the years that he had been at Foster's, he never even gave them a hint as to who his original owner was. But it wasn't long after Frankie said that when the series finally showed what really happened, and it all came down to Wilt's rival. Around the climax of the two-part episode, Wilt finally made it back to his hometown during the present time, which was when his rival officially revealed himself. Foul Larry was an imaginary friend who, much like Wilt, was clearly designed to play basketball. Larry had a big basketball for a head, and his entire body looked like it was made out of the same material as well. Talk about ball is life. He first appeared in present time at the basketball court in Wilt's own, where the two went head-to-head in a game. However, their bout didn't go well for the lovable imaginary friend, as Wilt was beaten by Larry for what turned out to be the second time. It's around this second loss that Wilt started to think back on his past life, and through a series of flashbacks, viewers finally got to see what really happened to him. Through the flashbacks, it was shown that Wilt's creator was a young boy who was obsessed with basketball, and imagined Wilt so that he could train and become better at the sport. This worked out well for him because through the flashbacks, they revealed that the child quickly became the best in their town. He and Wilt were practically unbeatable on the court. That is, until one day, another child in their town created a friend of his own, and that was when Wilt first met Foul Larry. The two duos went head-to-head in a game, only this time it didn't go the way it usually went. Instead of winning, Wilt was forced to sacrifice himself to save his kid. And if that sounds dark, that's because it's what happened, and it's what makes the story so heartbreaking. You see, instead of blocking Foul Larry like he was supposed to, Wilt noticed that his creator was about to be crushed to death and decided to jump in the way to save him. This resulted in one of the most gruesome injuries from that era of cartoons, and finally revealed why Wilt looked the way he did in the present. During the flashbacks, Wilt was shown to have two symmetrical eyes as well as two full arms. However, that changed the moment he chose to save the young boy who made him. But when Larry landed on Wilt, he crushed his arm and caused it to bend the wrong way, which was followed by the bouncing basketball hitting Wilt in the eye and causing it to bend and be permanently damaged. It was super brutal to watch as a kid, and probably one of the most memorable scenes in the show. That being said, their loss to Foul Larry wouldn't be the saddest part of Wilt's story, as the two-part episode would soon reveal. As you can imagine, both Wilt and his creator, Jordan Michaels, were pretty upset by their loss, but for two different reasons. Jordan was upset because, let's be honest, nobody likes to lose, but he never blamed Wilt for the loss, despite that being the reason Wilt was upset. That's right, Wilt felt as though he had let his creator down and that he was the reason Jordan was so distraught. And instead of talking it out with the kid, Wilt chose to do something that was truly heartbreaking to hear about. He left. Without even saying goodbye, Wilt decided to leave his hometown and find a new place where he felt that he could belong without hurting anyone. Now, Good Wilt Hunting made it clear that Jordan would not have wanted Wilt to leave in the first place, and the only reason he didn't stop him was that he didn't know that his friend had run away. It wasn't until Stats, the imaginary friend / scoreboard, told Jordan that Wilt had left that he knew to look for him. However, by the time the child made it to the basketball court, all that he could find was the wristband that had come off Wilt's broken arm during the game. Jordan picked up the wristband, but from that moment on, all he could do was hope to run into his friend again. Thankfully, the episode ended on a mostly positive note, which came after the very heartwarming reunion that all of the fans had been waiting for. While back in his hometown, Wilt and Jordan ended up reuniting, with Jordan apologizing to Wilt for what happened back then. He claimed that Wilt was a hero for saving him, which, yeah, he kinda was, and even went on to show his imaginary friend that he had held onto his memory for all those years. He did so by showing Wilt the wristband that he had left behind. Apparently, Jordan had held onto it all that time just in case he should ever see his friend again, and now after their reunion, Jordan did what you would expect and offered to let Wilt live with him, which would have meant the end for Wilt in the series. But thankfully, he declined the offer as he didn't want to leave his friends at Foster's home, who clearly needed him. Jordan was sad to hear Wilt decline his offer, but ultimately respected his decision, and the two swore to keep in touch from that point on. It was a really heartwarming ending for an otherwise heartbreaking story, and during the credits for the episode, Wilt and the rest of the friends at Foster's could be seen watching Jordan play basketball at the professional level, and you could just tell how excited Wilt was to watch it based on his constant commentary. But I guess there's only one thing left to ask: why would they put such a good and lovable character through something so traumatizing? Be sure to let me know what you think in the comments below, and I look forward to reading all of them.